I'm going to show you two videos from a mutual of mine. These two videos, I should say, are going to spotlight the difference between when we are under a Republican administration and when we are under a Democratic administration, and what those two different styles of governance mean for job growth, the debt, and the deficit. Watch this.
All right, so with the news that Trump's disastrous tax bill has passed both the House and the Senate with 0 Democratic votes, I thought it was time to take a look at the last 2 times in history that a tax plan has been passed with 0 votes from the opposition party. And of course, I'm talking about Trump's first tax cut, the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, as well as the 1993 Deficit Reduction Act, which was championed by Bill Clinton. But in part 1 here, we're going to look at Trump's tax cut and see whether the promises were kept by Trump or whether the opposition party was right to vote against it. And as a reminder, this is what the Republicans looked like almost 8 years ago after the passage of that law, and Trump wasn't shy about what he thought that law would bring to the American people.
See, you're going to see what happens. And ultimately, what does it mean? It means jobs.
So Trump was promising jobs, which makes sense because jobs was in the name of the act. But did it deliver? Well, let's head over to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics and look at the job creation before and after Trump's tax plan went into effect. And as you can see, I've exported that Bureau of Labor Statistics data into this handy Excel chart. And here I've broken down that chart into just 4 years, the 2 years prior to Trump's tax plan taking effect and the 2 years after. Now, if we're to believe Trump, we should see massive jobs in these years over the 2 years with the previous tax rates. But if we look over here, we can see that there's actually 174,000 less jobs created in the 2 years after the tax plan than there were under the previous tax rates. And this is backed up by articles like this 2 years after its passage that says, did Trump's tax cuts boost hiring? Most companies say no, but what did companies spend that extra savings on? Well, like this article says, just 1 year after its passing, corporations set records for stock buybacks, which only made stockholders richer and did nothing for the American worker. And as you can see here, after years of yearly deficits coming down under the previous tax plan, Trump instituted his tax cuts and saw deficits explode. And of course, with those tax rates in place in 2020 during COVID, we more than doubled the previous record for a deficit at $3.1 trillion. So in closing, not only did the 2017 tax cuts not deliver jobs for average Americans, it exploded the national debt by giving away trillions to billionaires and corporations. In part 2, though, come back and see how Bill Clinton decided to raise taxes in order to reduce the deficit and how he was fear-mongered by Republicans. This video is up right now. All right, welcome back to part 2 of this 2-part series that looks at the last 2 tax plans that received 0 votes from the opposition party. In part 1, we looked at Trump's 2017 tax cuts, and in this one, we're going to look at the 1993 Deficit Reduction Act, which was championed by Bill Clinton. And it's worth noting that before Bill Clinton took office in January of 1993, America had been governed for 12 years by these 2 guys who were anything but fiscally responsible. And nothing outlines that better than this September 1985 article that talks about the United States crossing the $2 trillion in national debt mark. And at the bottom of that article, it says it took 189 years for the debt to reach $1 trillion in Reagan's first year and only 4 years to double to $2 trillion, all during the administration of a president who once promised to balance the budget. And yet less than 7 years later, before Election Day 1992, the national debt had doubled again to over $4 trillion. And that debt exploded under those 2 Republican presidents because, you guessed it, they cut taxes on the wealthiest Americans. The top marginal tax rate was 70% when Reagan entered office. He lowered it to 50% and then lowered it as low as 28%, despite the fact that in 1936 and beyond, for 40 years, we had a top marginal tax rate above 70%. But then when Bill Clinton in 1993 decided to bump it up to 39.6%, here's what Republican leader John Kasich predicted after the House Democrats passed it and it moved on to the Senate.
And maybe we can stop it in the United States Senate before it sends the economy over the cliff. If they do pass it in the Senate, I guess we'll be around to try to help them fix this thing come next year, when the job-killing effects of this program begin to kick in.
And yes, it did pass in the Senate, but after a 49-49 vote with 0 Republicans voting for it, Al Gore himself had to come down and cast the deciding vote himself. But did it have those job-killing effects that John Kasich predicted? Can you say absolutely not? Bill Clinton actually set a record for best job creation by a president of all time, creating over 23 million jobs in his 8 years in office. And to put that 23.2 million jobs in perspective, you can take the 8-year total of Ronald Reagan's job creation of 15.9 million, the 4 years of George H.W. Bush at 2.6 million, and the 8 years of George W. Bush at 2.1 million, combine them all together, and you still come up 2.5 million jobs short, 20,690,000 versus 23,214,000. And I find it hysterical that Trump's 2017 tax cut promised jobs but didn't deliver. Meanwhile, Bill Clinton's 1993 promised deficit reduction but included the best job creation in history. But how did it do with that deficit reduction? Well, as you can see here, in 1993, Bill Clinton passed that tax cut, and over the next 8 years, the deficit went down every year until we ran 4 straight budget surpluses, the last budget surpluses we've ever passed. But what do you think the Republicans did when we passed that first budget surplus? That's right. Instead of paying down the national debt as the economy is roaring forward, they called for a $1 trillion tax cut. And when George W. Bush won a razor-thin election in the early 2000s, he and the Republicans passed 2 tax cuts that immediately turned those surpluses back into deficits and led us into the Great Recession. And all of this makes what happened today in Congress even more disgusting, because instead of embracing a tax plan like Bill Clinton's that led to record job growth and the first budget surpluses we've seen in 5 decades, we're instead returning to doubling down to this tax cut that didn't deliver jobs and didn't do anything for the American worker. Good luck.